Yeah, yeah. He and I talked a little bit about that, and I said they're just not there. I wish they were.
How are you?
Well,
Good.
it all depends on the discussion tonight.
It'd take
No,
a
but
lot. It would take. I was hoping someone would win the lottery in this town, so tax revenue.
That's what we issued. What's the code?
You used to have it on here.
Oh, I got it.
You'll be back.
Following too closely is 60.
Yep.
That's a significant difference. Surcharges are not actual fine revenue.
Let's see, these are all 75.
I didn't think it was. Yeah, your
No.
scrutiny is necessary.
Surcharges used as
You lost it.
It's pretty conservative, but it needed the kind of scrutiny that it should have.
Here we're which is interesting.
But city fines, the state fines.
Two asked me for a schedule to visit and was in there. So I sent him a
City college statute.
Thank you for accepting my application.
The Supreme Court has the right to set fines.
Mr. Harrison, how are you?
No, we
Charter.
Still got the power buttons. Still there.
Whatever he does has to fit within our law.
Is he the owner of Tweeds or something?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's a businessman.
Yeah.
Well, one
Nice.
of the projects he's working on is finding a venue for the Flying W Wranglers.
Yeah.
You mean up here instead of a permanent?
I'm going to be.
Yeah.
Hey.
Technically.
I'll protect you.
Perfect.
So that's got to be.
We've been having a lot of fun talking about the chickens.
Healthier?
I'm with
We
you.
dealt with before.
Yeah.
They run it, but they do it all on their own.
We'll know in a few days. It'll be fun.
Dispute settled.
Done.
little treat. And even
No city involved.
I don't disagree with you.
None.
Give us.
Let's get rid of the barking dog ordinance while we're at it.
That's not.
So that
That's a noise ordinance. That doesn't even have to come into the parking lot.
But there's also Dale Duncan.
I've got a neighbor that continues to call the cops on me.
Oh, really? The dog will keep.
But I bring him in at night.
One of those towers.
Yeah, I've tried all kinds of things. They're getting better. It's young and
Just think about John's comments about
did Chris tell you we had a lot of fun last night?
about him.
Remember when he was coming?
I know Andrew was sleeping and I went in the bedroom.
Yeah.
I was in there watching television.
West Virginia, we had chickens and they were all over the place.
Cleaned up.
And they was
Well, they were making it to a good time last night. You know.
I have chickens. Must be those West Virginia.
And that's where they run. That's where you have hundreds and hundreds of them. They run loose all over the property.
That's a difference.
But I can
It
remember
is.
watching that game and they were.
Remember my granddad's farm over.
There we can have water.
I mean, you come on the porch, you want to sit on the swing. As a kid, I hated that.
They're really popular.
And I agree with you there. That is not totally a problem.
But that would be something. Design is still.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm going to start thinking about that place at 24. I like
Oh, come on.
That's got a beautiful
He did such a good job, and we actually went to dance class
Oh, yeah.
on Sunday. We had to go, we had to be there early, and then we left. Instead of going to late service. those of us who had gone to the Sunday morning little sister.
So how you doing?
Two girls on this council, and one has been at my side.
I'm trying to get the minutes of the meeting up here, but I can't find it again.
There's something to be said for that,
That's right.
even if it is based on alphabetical order.
I put on here, then I load it, then I don't have it.
The minutes from the last meeting?
Every time
It's page 10.
this is not going to work. This is not going to work. 'Cause every time I save the mail, I pull up all my mail, I can't find it.
If you'd like, I'll sit down with you sometime.
No, just send me it. I got the
Figure the basis. You got to
Maybe you didn't. When you open it as an attachment to the email,
I haven't.
you've then got to then click up above and open it in Adobe Reader and save it in Adobe Reader.
all I do is say,
Oh, you just do it all from the email. Well, then I don't know. I use a different procedure and I never have a problem.
I have Greater Woodland Park, I talked to her. Board of Directors. Everything else but
You're looking for
tonight. That's why we have to do it.
I'm just saying.
For having this.
You're,
If you open the message on your home computer, then it will. Yeah, but I saved it.
mine does. The way I've got my settings set, I can see it here, and on the computer.
David, if you could forward to me.
Let's see if I can do that.
Adams to
That's what you did for me last time.
Yeah.
judge too.
So let's see.
One of those winter.
You want the email,
Yes, Betty.
Gary?
But, or if it just won't
Oh, yeah.
And this is the agenda for tonight. You want?
be, I miss that.
Should be on its way.
Scott's last count.
I think.
Looks real
You got-
sad about it, doesn't he?
Okay.
Chicken people, I see them.
Call the meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled city council meeting for Wednesday, December the 5th, which would normally be held on December the 6th. But for availability of key personnel for tonight, some time ago we made the decision to hold the meeting tonight on December the 5th. So with that, we'll take a roll call. Suzanne?
Turley,
Present?
Brevetto,
Here.
Carlson,
Here.
Harrison,
Here.
Harvey,
Here,
Schaefer, Smith.
Here. And before we go on, I'll just make a comment. Councilman Schaefer is not here tonight. He had a death of a very close friend of 50-some years, and he had to travel back to Ohio to attend that memorial service. So our thoughts and prayers are with John. And now let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, item 4, we do have an application for the Downtown Development Authority. And for information on that, I want to turn to Suzanne.
Thank you, Mayor. On October 31st, the city received a resignation letter from Jeanette Brown for her DDA position. So that created an opening on the DDA board. We advertised the position as required on the city's website, in the Courier, and on our Facebook page. At that time, we received 2 applications. They were due by November 30th, and so 2 were received. When we were reviewing the criteria of the 2 applications, there was one that did not meet the DDA required criteria. The 2 applicants were Mr. Scott Davis and Mr. Tanner Coy. And looking through the different criteria needs, it was Mr. Davis that did not have what he needed to have. He was, as you remember, I'd like to refresh your memory if you don't remember, that the criteria has to be one of the following to become a DDA board member. You have to either reside or be a business leasee or own real property in the downtown development district in the city of Woodland Park. Or in addition, you can be an officer or director of a corporation having its place of business in the district also makes you eligible. So he did not meet any of those requirements. So currently, we have one applicant. It's Mr. Tanner Coy, who coincidentally could not be here this evening. He's away on business. However, he has made himself available via telephone if the council would so desire.
And I'd like to read a letter that we received from Tanner. In fact, Tanner worked his trip. He was planning on being at the council meeting tomorrow night, not realizing that we had changed it to tonight. So that's the reason Tanner isn't here tonight. But Tanner wrote us a letter. City council members, thank you for accepting my Woodland Park DDA Board of Directors application. Unfortunately, I will be traveling out of Colorado Wednesday, December the 5th, and will not return to Colorado until the evening of Thursday, December 6th, leaving me unable to attend Wednesday's City Council meeting in person. I will be available by phone during most of my trip. Please feel free to call me with any questions that you may have. Thank you for your time and consideration. And while I'm talking, I'll just go ahead. We do have Tanner's application for the DDA. I think many of you, probably just about everybody, knows Tanner and the wonderful things that he's doing here in our community with Tweeds and with so many other different events that he supports, including the one that just happened, the Holiday Home Tour and his role in that. So with that, I'll see if council has any comments. If they feel we need to call Tanner up and get hold of him, I don't need to, but see if anybody has any comments about Tanner.
No, but I'll move to accept Tanner onto the DDA.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept Tanner as a member of the DDA board. Any discussion from council? Very good. Suzanne?
Brevetto,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yep.
Smith,
Yes.
Turley.
Absolutely.
Motion passes unanimously.
And Tanner, if you're watching this, congratulations. But if you're really out there somewhere, you're probably not watching City Council. But I think Tanner will do a great job and be a great addition to our DDA board, and it'll be a big help to Brian and the whole board. So we look forward to that. I'll now turn to the consent calendar. We have the minutes from the November the 15th regular meeting, and also to approve an application for a liquor license for Mini Mart. Now, for that, I'll turn to Suzanne again.
Thank you, Mayor. We received this application from Loaf and Jug Mini Mart. They're the Loaf and Jug located at 260 U.S. Highway 24 East. We've gone through their application. There's been no changes in officers or owners. The manager has remained the same. They're current on all of their fees and applications to the city, and they've had no violations within this past year. The city would recommend that this application for renewal be approved and it become effective January 7th, 2013. If I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to.
Any questions, comments for Suzanne? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as read. Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
If the consent calendar includes the approval of the minutes from the 15th of November, Erin, did you have a correction or an addition or a clarification?
Actually, I don't. I think the minutes are fine. I think when we get to the later legislative matter, we might want to correct them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
No further questions.
Okay. Anyone? We'll take a vote. Suzanne?
Okay, Carlson,
Aye.
Harrison,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yep.
Smith,
Yes.
Turley,
Yes.
Brevetto.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. And we have two ordinances on initial posting tonight. The first is for consideration, again, initial posting. Ordinance number 1170, which is it's a number of items in the municipal code that relate to streamlining public notice requirements, and set the public hearing for January the 3rd. And for that, I'll turn to our Planning Department head, Sally Riley.
Thank you, Mayor Turley, council members. This is of a legislative matter. This is amendments to various sections, primarily the subdivision and the zoning code, that does streamline and standardize our public notice timelines, mainly. There are typically 3 types of public notices that are used. First is the publication of the notice in the newspaper. Second is a posting of the property with the public notice sign. And then third is sending letters to the adjacent property owners around the affected property. I was not planning on going through the ordinance. There are 15 different sections that this timeline amendment applies to. And primarily we had notice timelines that were from 15 days prior to the public hearing to as few as 5 days of the public hearing. What we're proposing is to standardize that to a 10-day for the signage and the letters, and then for the public notice in the newspaper to be the previous week, prior week to the public hearing. And I'd like to just note that that is usually established by the Planning Commission meeting so that those notices go out well ahead of the City Council's hearing. Primarily it deals with the vacation of rights-of-way, various types of subdivisions, the conditional use permits, and historic landmarks. With that, we feel that this will help our applicants with this standardization, and it certainly will help our public to know that these are being posted on a standardized basis. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any related to standardization and streamlining the public notice process.
Questions, comments for Sally? Yes, Bob.
Were all these changes proposed by the planning staff?
They were. This is something that we've been wanting to do for quite some time, and so we've been able to get that done this year.
Thank you for taking the initiative.
And I'll just make a comment too. I think the attachment 1 that you included that kind of showed everything and laid all that out, I thought was very helpful. When you go through all that, it's a lot of different places, a lot of different words. And I thought that one chart was very useful. Any other questions, comments?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 1170 on initial posting and set the public hearing for January 3rd, 2013.
Second.
Having a motion and a second relative to ordinance approving ordinance number 1170 on initial posting. Any additional discussion, comments, questions from council? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Suzanne?
Harrison?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Turley?
Yes.
Rivetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
And item 8B, another ordinance on initial posting, is consideration of ordinance number 1180, amending the municipal code concerning possession of marijuana and related violations, and set the public hearing for January the 3rd. And for that, I'll turn to our city attorney, Aaron Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, this ordinance is in front of you because on November 6th, the voters of Colorado approved Amendment 64, which did change possession laws throughout the state and did make the possession of 1 ounce or less of marijuana by a person's 21 years of age or older legal. This, our current code as it's written, is inconsistent with Amendment 64, and as was outlined in a short presentation to your last meeting, and direction given by council, based on that presentation, we are presenting this ordinance for your consideration. Now, in addition to conforming the city code, in particular chapter 9.30 to Amendment 64, this ordinance would make a couple other policy changes. And again, for the record, while the impetus for rewriting Chapter 9.30 was to make it consistent with the Colorado Constitution as amended by passage of Amendment 64, the proposed ordinance does accomplish this. In addition, the proposed code changes reflect some key policy changes discussed with Chief Larson and Deputy Gomes as follows. The proposed ordinance would prohibit possession of marijuana by persons under 18 only. The current ordinance addresses adults, so after Amendment 64, it would have addressed that gap, the people older than 18 but under 21. So this would address possession by persons 18 years and under only. And it would be regardless of the amount of marijuana. So the current code has jurisdiction only over possession by persons 18 years of age if it is not more than 1 ounce. This would change Woodland Park's code and give the municipal court jurisdiction over the possession, no matter how much it was, by a person under 18 years of age. Those cases where the minor was in possession of more than 1 ounce, those weren't before under the jurisdiction of the municipal court. So those went to the county court. So that is a change. That would give the municipal court jurisdiction over possession by an 18-year-old, no matter how much the amount. And then finally, one other change that this makes is it does do away with the possibility of jail as a penalty for possession. Our old code provided that a jail sentence could be imposed as well as a fine. The code as proposed with this ordinance takes away jail as a penalty, and there would only be the ability to fine the offender. And that fine would be, which the code currently allows for it, it doesn't change, up to $1,000. I'd be happy to take questions.
Okay, I have one. I think I'm a little bit confused. So, with Amendment 64, a person who's age 21 or older can possess up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Correct.
I guess I don't understand where this 18-year-old stuff relative to our modifying our ordinance fits. Why 18? Why not? How does that relate to 19 or 20-year-olds? I guess I just don't understand.
Right, and that would be a policy decision, and that is something that was discussed with the chief. And I am going to paraphrase a little bit, and then I think if Chief Larson would like to help answer any questions, that might be good as well. Currently, when you've got any sort of crime involving marijuana with an adult, and for purposes of this discussion, adult is someone over the age of 18. There are usually more serious crimes involved, and so the thought is that the person over 18 years old who would have any marijuana offenses to be charged against them more than likely would also be involved in some other crime. Those other crimes would have gone to the county court anyway. So this is really sort of as a matter of administrative efficiency to just include the 19-year-old and the 20-year-old because their marijuana crimes may be involving more serious crimes, to just move the jurisdiction of all those to the county court. And I'd be happy to let Chief Larson add anything to that.
Typically, the marijuana offenses that were, excuse me.
Bob, if you could use the mic.
Typically, the marijuana offenses that go to city court are simple possession by children on a first offense. And they end up going to teen court if the judge feels that's appropriate and if the parents of the child feel it's appropriate for the kid to go to teen court. More serious cases generally go to the juvenile court, as Aaron mentioned. 18 is the break point for adult versus child. We're proposing to use this to regulate marijuana possession by children on first offenses. The state is going to be revising all the marijuana laws as a result of Amendment 64. We don't know what the state's going to decide to do, and I didn't want to write something now that would be in serious conflict with something the legislature may pass in a few months. So we may need to come back and talk to you later if we think it's appropriate to deal with adult possession of marijuana in the future in the municipal court. But I was hoping not to have to come back to you a couple of times. And it may not be necessary to regulate it at all. There's one other thing, too. Most of our cases, as Aaron mentioned, involve some other crime. The rules of criminal procedure require us to not make a defendant go to more than one place for the same criminal episode. So, for instance, if we arrest a guy for assault and it's a significant enough assault that it's going to go to the county court or the district court, the marijuana case has to go to that court also. We can't put one in one court and one in the other. Domestic violence, for instance, is a matter of state concern reserved to the state by state statute. We find marijuana in those cases. That would have to go to the county court if it's a misdemeanor assault, the district court if it's a felony assault. So the majority of those cases are gone from our court already, and that's part of it. But another big part, as I mentioned before, I just don't want to ask you to do something now and then find out the state's doing something radically different. And we don't have to be the same as the state, but there should be a reason for us to be different, not just because I thought it was a good idea.
Thank you.
So, looking at the code and bringing this code up so that it is in accordance with the other things that are on the books. What this does is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that by keep having this at 18 years of age, and it's strictly a marijuana possession, allows us to keep that within our court system in the city,
right.
And maybe based upon recommendations and things that could be something handled in the teen court for rehabilitation or whatever,
right.
And that we don't put them into the regular criminal justice system. Is that fair?
That's a very important part of it. Our teen court can give individual attention from the prosecutor, the judge, and the teen court coordinator to that kid. In the county court or in a juvenile court, it's much more busy, and there's just limits on what they're able to work with. But typically it's a first offender. We have a pretty low recidivism rate on first offenders on this. If it involves multiple offenses or it involves sales or something more significant, it needs to go to juvenile court, in my opinion.
Okay. I think Bob was first.
So this has nothing to do with the emergency ordinance about sale of marijuana in the city. That'll be later on the agenda. And it actually really has nothing to do with 64 either, I don't think, because it's always been illegal for people.
Our present ordinance, though, prohibits adults, period, from possessing marijuana, and that has to do with 64.
Okay.
So we need to make that part consistent before the amendment goes into effect, so that we don't have a law that says we can arrest people when the state constitution actually says we can't.
Okay, fine.
And I'm not sure that we will need to deal with adult possession or not. It kind of depends on what the legislature does and then what the council is interested in doing after that.
Okay.
Yes, Gary.
Amendment 64 covers...
Could you sit up towards the microphone, please? Thank you.
Amendment 64 indicates something to the fact that anyone above 21 years old would be legal to have 1 ounce or less of... What about a 19-year-old or 20-year-old? I gather they're not allowed to have it.
Correct.
Okay.
They're also not allowed.
So why don't you make this 21 and younger? If you're gonna have this ordinance, why 18? Why not just make it
Because
under
18
21?
is the age that deals with juveniles for us. And that 19-year-old can go to county court on a simple possession. It's most likely, if the legislature does what they've done historically, going to be a petty offense. It'll probably be a non-arrestable offense for small amounts with a simple fine. And we thought that would be sufficient to deal with people in that age group, which is what they face now. But
What would happen if we just got rid of this ordinance?
if we got rid of it altogether, then the kids that we deal with in juvenile possessions would have to go into the juvenile court system, which gives them a different kind of a criminal record, has different and more serious
I
penalties.
just don't like to make criminals out of teenagers. That's
No,
That's what
the
we're trying
way
to
the
do.
teen court works is the kid gets a deferred sentence and the record goes away. So what I'm trying to do is keep these minor things at a low level that can be gone if the kid completes the teen court process. But an option is to just do away with it altogether. It's whatever the council thinks
then they
is a
would need
better
some
idea.
protection.
Yeah.
It would have to go to a.
Right.
Yes,
Unless
Carol.
the state comes out with something in their code indicating that those under 21 won't be criminally prosecuted
That's
for under
always a
1
possi-
ounce.
It's a possibility. I doubt that they'll do it, just looking at what they've done in the past, but I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing on where they're going to go.
Are you suggesting delay this until they do something?
If you think that's better, I'm certainly going to do it. The council tells us to, but we're going to get these cases coming out of the school, coming out of the parks and things like this, and it gives us a way to keep handling them as we have, rather than raising the significance of it for a while.
And this is initial reading, and there would be a public hearing and public comment. I believe Carol had a comment.
It's probably rhetorical. It's just that this has to do with jurisdiction. The 19-year-old or the 20-year-old could still, the case could still go to municipal court, could it not?
Not once this is passed, no.
They would automatically go to a higher court. Okay.
The higher court that they go to actually has a milder form of prosecution for adults at that age than our court does.
What, is it a misdemeanor or what is it currently?
It's a petty offense, which is a step below misdemeanor. It's a non-arrestable petty offense also. So basically, if you can identify the person, you give them a summons and they go, and they don't get arrested.
And Eric has a question.
I have a couple. When does 64 go into effect? Isn't it usually July of the next year, or is it January 1?
It'll be when the governor signs it, which will be sometime this month.
30 days after the certification of the election.
Okay, so acting on this now basically has to happen. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1180 on first reading and the public hearing to be set for January the 3rd. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Suzanne?
Smith,
Yes.
Turley,
Yes.
Rivetto.
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Harvey.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
And now we're going to move into item 9. We have 3 items for public hearing tonight. 2 of them deal with the budget, and the other one deals with a change to the municipal code. For the council, what I would, I'd like for us to, on all 3 of these, try to stay focused, keep our comments concise, non-repetitive, and one of the things I would like to do on the budget-related ordinances is a little bit different than we've done in the past. I've been doing a little work on my parliamentary procedure, And when we're going through these big ordinances and things, which we've already, gone through on the 2013 budget, and so we've hashed that out a lot. And so we have the final version of that. What I would like to see is, as we go through the process, when we get to the point, instead of changing things in the budget, if anybody thinks we should do that, I would actually like to have a more formal process. I'd like for us to have a motion to approve the ordinances written, get a second on that, and then during our discussion, if anyone has any changes that they would like to make to any item in the budget, I would like to entertain an amendment to the motion specifying the exact change that they would like to have. And that will get us through a process of where you, in fact, have a motion for the change. You may or may not get a second to that motion. We will have discussion on that change, and then we will have a vote on whether or not that change is incorporated into the ordinances written. Does that kind of make sense? Very good. With that, geez, that actually went better than I thought. I had my little parliamentary procedure thing out doing some studying. With that, we'll turn to item 9A, which is approval of ordinance number 1176, providing supplemental appropriation to the 2012 budget. And for that, I'm going to turn to our Finance Director, Kelly Case.
Very quickly, though, just remember this is the supplemental appropriation for the 2012 budget. Right. The next item is the 2013 budget, just as a point of reminding. Please, Kelly.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the second reading of 1176. I've pointed out that there is a detail sheet attached to the back of that on a line item by line item basis of recommended supplements to the budget for specific purposes. I will call attention to account number 100-116-9222, Red Mountain Adventure Park. That has been set at $136,000, and that is an investment at 100% by the city, as there was no grant funding for the landscaping, the structures, the enclosures of the trash containers, and the paving of the parking lot. We invested that money as a city to complete those projects and to complete that park. So that is 100% funded. The reason it's accounted for this way is it's a project that has spanned more than 1 year, and so for simplicity, it's best to keep all the expenditures associated with that asset in the same place for tracking purposes. So with that, we would recommend approval of the supplemental appropriation for 2012 after the public hearing, and we're happy as a staff to answer any questions that you may have.
We'll go into the public, open it up for public comment shortly, but for now, any questions from council for Kelly? And there will be additional opportunities also. Hearing none, for now, I will open the floor to any public comment on ordinance number 1176. Any public comment? I got so many pieces of paper up here tonight. Hearing none, I will close the public comment. Council, any questions? Yes, sir, Bob.
Yeah, I made some comments and we had an exchange of emails with David concerning how we account for this, because the amount that was requested in ordinance 1176, when added to what's already been appropriated in the budget or authorized, whatever the terminology is, back last December, would result in much higher numbers or different numbers than the latest forecast that the city had for the end of year expenditures in that account. And so David provided some responses, and he said that there was going to be some additional information provided. So anyway, I think if we hear it from your mouth rather than trying to read it, it may make more sense for us to understand that. But essentially, there was about a $300,000 difference between the amount in the 2012 budget, if we appropriate these additional amounts, as opposed to what you had projected in the 2013 budget as your final expenditures for the year. So I wanted to get that $300,000 difference cleared up.
Absolutely. The just to review some terms very quickly, I'm going to talk about the terms budgeted, projected, and then supplemental appropriation. First of all, supplemental appropriation, if for those of you with a DoD background, appropriation takes on a completely different meaning than what it does with municipal finances. This appropriation is more of a reconciliation for things that we discuss as a staff and a council, and we move forward then with taking action on those. The supplemental appropriation document is an auditing tool that allows the auditors to reconcile the things that we expend. It's not, if you will, an authorization for the staff to spend that money. It's truly a reconciliation. So the term supplemental appropriation can be misleading in that regard. And I don't want it to be confused with projected or budgeted. It's a completely different process. When we budget, we're looking 6 months before a year begins, and we do our best guess as to what revenue streams we're going to have and then what outflows we're going to have as expenditures. Well into the process, we then project how a year is going to end. And that's what we typically do after 6 or 7 months of expenses. We want to see how that year is in, and we adjust as we need to. 4 years ago, our expenditures looked like they were going to exceed our revenues, and we really toned back on expenses. Everything had to be approved through me, no matter what the amount was. So we really use that as kind of a process to make sure that we don't exceed what we have budgeted. So there is no intent for projected numbers to equal supplemental appropriation numbers. In fact, I would probably not want them to, because a supplemental appropriation, we come to you as an action so that we can close out the books as part of an audit. The projection is our best guess as to how things are going to end up. What I don't want to do is ask you for a supplemental appropriation, and then, for whatever reason, we have to exceed that amount, and we are wrong on our projections. Don't know if it could be salt sand for when we get some snow finally, whatever the case may be. So that's why in that list you won't see the appropriation number less than the projected number. We want the projected number to be less so that there is room for a little bit of a contingency associated with that. The $303,000, the vast majority of the differences associated with that were projects that you were very familiar with. The Red Mountain Adventure Park that Kelly mentioned, the FEMA grant matching for the project along Fountain Creek. There were some other things. The advancement of the pavement management plan that you as a council said, yes, that makes sense to move that from 2013 to 2012. There were some IT things. You allowed us to purchase the code enforcement vehicle early because we had the cash on hand to make that happen rather than wait to 2013 and put it into the revolving loan fund. And there were some other things related to legal, mayor's expenses, and council expenses. So I can't give you a dollar-for-dollar breakdown, or breakout, but that totals well over that $300,000 that you were concerned about. Can I answer any questions, or did that help, or not?
So right now we won't know actually how much we will have expended in 2012 until we have the audit report next April time.
That's correct. The auditors typically come middle to the end of March. They prepare a report in April, and we present that to the council in May.
But is there a number that you have to work within until then? I mean, in other words, if we appropriate, we budget $1 million, and during the year you say, I'm going to go over that $1 million. At that point, before you get to that $1 million, do you come back to us and ask for that additional funds then?
Absolutely.
That's what this 1176 does then?
No, it really doesn't. It allows for that opportunity for expenses to increase, which we've recognized. And that's why the supplemental appropriation does get fairly close to the projected number, but I always want it to be a little bit more in case there's some unknown expense that we might have to have. Within the general fund, within the 410 fund, 510, 520, any of the funds, we're not required to balance each year's budget. We have to balance each year's budget, including the reserve from the previous year. So that's what this also does, is it ensures that we don't expend more than what we have. My intent is to never expend more in any given year than what we bring in as revenues, a balanced budget, and that's what, in a few minutes, we're going to present to you.
Okay, just trying to understand the process.
It's a different language to a degree.
And you learn more each year. Any other comments, discussions by council on this? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1176, providing supplemental appropriation to the 2012 budget. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Suzanne?
Okay, Hurley,
Yes.
Ravetto,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Unanimous, motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you, council. We'll now move on to the approval of the 2013 budget. This is ordinance number 1177, appropriating sums of money to the various funds in the amounts and for the purpose as set forth for the 2013 budget year. And for that, we turn to Kelly Case once again.
And once again, I'll jump in front of Kelly.
Okay.
Council, you've done a great job with this budget. You've asked tough questions. We've worked very hard to roll this budget in with a comprehensive plan. We've done our best to present to you balanced budgets with a couple of caveats that we've explained in all these different documents. Department heads are here. The staff is here. We're ready to answer any questions. Our goal tonight would be to have you approve the 2013 budget as written.
And then
Thank you,
Kelly?
Mayor. David. And this ordinance has been updated minorly, in a minor fashion. You did receive updated pages. We did go through the exercise of updating our projections for year end and making some adjustments there. And it did, we did make one change in the 520 or wastewater fund that changed the revenue number, and that has been reflected in the ordinance. It's not significant, but we did feel like it was important to update that and make it more real than we originally thought. So, we would recommend approval of ordinance 1177 after the public hearing, and again, we're happy to answer any questions.
any questions for Kelly at this time before we open the public hearing? And there will be additional opportunity also. Hearing none, then I will go ahead and open the floor to any public hearing, any public comments on ordinance number 1177 for the 2013 budget. Anyone have any comments? Hearing none, I will close the floor for public comments and see if council has any additional comments and discussion and relative to the ordinance and the budget. Yes, Bob.
Again, I had an exchange of emails with David and with Kelly, and I questioned a number of line items in the budget. Anyway, those emails were forwarded to the council members for their advanced information. It gets a little confusing with all the cross-hatching and to and fro's, but let me try to summarize then. I had some general comments, the nature of which were that I approved the budget where we are not continuing to expand the size of the contingency fund, that we keep the contingency funds at a level, and I suggested that we, instead of coming up just with a arbitrary number, that we have it with a multiple of what the Tabor requirement is for contingency funds, or a flat $1 million or something like that. But anyway, what I didn't want was, as we may have gotten more increased revenues over a year, like for instance 2012, we find out next spring that we had much more revenues than we thought we would get, or much less expenditures than we thought, that would, in a sense, have additional funds available from left over from 2012. And rather than that continuing to build up our bank balance, so to speak, that we should do something with that money. And I had suggested in my statements that could either go to pay off the COPs early or be a rebate to the taxpayers. And Dave's comments back to those were that he understands, he agrees with the need to pay off loans early and that sort of thing, but that until we have the information on what were the overruns or underruns on expenditures in April timeframe, that we defer that kind of discussion until that time. And so I'm perfectly willing to accept that comment on his part. My other comment was,
can I interrupt you before? Are you moving to a
so
a
we can
topic
talk
different
about
than reserve?
Okay, we'll finish with. I'm going to move to a different topic.
Okay,
than reserve.
because I'll give an input on that. We don't want to have I don't want anybody to think that we have this huge chunk of money sitting out there, but I think we do have to look that if there was some kind of emergency situation. I think about things like the Waldo Canyon fire, different kinds of things that can happen, and there's many of them. I just want to make sure that we have enough of a reserve to really operate our city in an emergency situation and I'm not even sure what that amount of time is. That's where I'm really thinking. So I think your point, I agree with that, and us really, I think, as we work through, let's say, the next budget, and really addressing the reserve and how much we think we should have, and that we actually work towards that goal of having that much reserve to handle certain kinds of contingency situations. Okay?
Thank you for that. In fact, I had called a number of city managers, Gunnison, Hawley. I mean, I looked at Hawley, they were wiped out in 2007 by a tornado. And I said, I was going to talk to the city manager there, Marcia, about, okay, how did the federal government help, the state help, how much would you have been able to use for reserves and that sort of thing. So I think in line with your idea that maybe we should handle it for next year as to what's a reasonable amount. I haven't had the chance to finish up that kind of research, and perhaps given another year we would have a chance to see what others are doing. But I did talk to the Office of the State Auditor, and they basically said that what we have right now at 17% is a normal range for cities. So I'm satisfied at this point. We're just going with what we have.
And I would say, as you talk to people, make sure that this might be what they do, but that doesn't mean they're doing what should be done.
Right.
Just because you have a city that doesn't. And so we want to make sure, I think, that we work through a process so that we're doing what we believe we should do. We could use examples, but I just want to make sure that, because if you use an example of FEMA and those kind of national things, based upon everything I hear about how money flows down, I think we need to have some reserve that we can operate our city the way we need to in an emergency situation, make sure that we have the funds that if necessary we can continue to pay our employees for doing the work that's really going to be needed in an emergency situation. So I think that's all part of that process that we'll go through.
If I could just, as you're doing that research, let's just make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Different communities define unrestricted fund balance, emergency funds, contingencies in different ways. Our emergency fund is truly what Tabor requires and what truly is liquid. We can get our hands on it. Right. So just let's make sure we're comparing.
Okay.
And like you said, there are lots of drivers for each city is different. For instance, at Gunnison.
Well, I don't think we need, to be honest, we're not going to change anything tonight.
Yeah.
So let's just stay focused and move forward on the budget, and then we can review that as we go on in the future for the next budget as we look at what we want to do with that in our work sessions. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Next.
The next general comment I had was, ever since I was elected and all the sessions we've had, goals and objectives, and I think there's been some support for the idea, is that we have at least a capital management plan, if not a capital and an operation maintenance management plan for at least 5 years. And again, I've talked to a number of cities, and in fact, the Office of the State Auditor, and they consider that a best practice. and that cities have that. In fact, some cities have 10-year plans, so that they can really look down the future. And so, I'm recommending that at some point over this next year, that we get one from the city as to their, what is their capital plan for the next 5 years, and what's their O&M plan for the next 5 years, so that we have a better idea of whether or not we're going to have a shortfall of funds in the future years or not. Anyway, I don't know if that's a motion I should make now, or is that a recommendation we can have that the city would take into account, or how are we going to?
Actually, I think it's you've made the point. It's included in the minutes, and as we review that, and as we start working on goals and objectives next year, and those kind of things, keep track of every bit of that, as well as this, the staff should, and we'll review all that, and let's, and I think, we should look at that. I mean, I think that candidly, in my discussions with staff, I think that information exists. It's just probably not in something that we call the 5-year plan for everything. So, yes, Eric.
Well, that was a comment I was going to make in dealing with KIP, and I know Bill's working on the pavement management plan. I mean, I think we are doing that. We probably just don't have it cataloged and stuffed in one place. So I just like to make the comment, I think we're doing that already, and maybe it can be refined and presented to us in a little better manner if that's what you're looking for.
Okay. Okay.
So now I move on to the line items, so to speak.
Are you going to be just commenting on them, or are you looking for changes to them?
I'm looking for changes to them.
Then I would ask that if you want a figure to change, I would ask that you wait until we actually get a motion to put this in, for approval, and then that we take each individual item that you want to see changed, that you make a motion as to what you want, and we'll see if there's a second, and then we'll have discussion on it, and we'll take a vote on that amendment.
So if no one has any other comments, other than that, I'll move this along, but I don't want to step in front yet.
No, please make the motion.
I don't know, Terry's got his...
And I'll let you make the motion,
Okay.
but before you do, and I'll second it after you do.
Okay.
But it's been my pleasure this is my 8th one. And Kelly, David, Sally, Bill, even Kip.
Pick on Kip.
And we had Jim Schultz for a long time. And I reflected back on the first budget I did. And the process has gotten so much smoother and so much easier. I mean, we're sitting here with 4 freshman councilmen, and I don't think any one of them could say that this was a difficult process. And I can promise you 8 years ago it was. So thank you, all of you, very, very much for making it so much easier, because it's understandable by even somebody like me, and I'm a construction worker. And it's easy to read. And that is, and maybe you did it in self-defense, Kelly, because now I'm not plopped in your office for 2-3 hours trying to get it all figured out. But I just wanted to tell all of you, thank you very, very much, because this is our job. This is really the job that the council has, is to keep the purse strings and keep them tight, and spend our taxpayers' money and our citizens' money as wisely as we possibly can. And I know that in the few 24 hours that I've been sitting here, that's been done very well, and for that, thank you all.
Thank you.
And I think, Terry, on that note, I'm going to back up and maybe let you just continue. Maybe then I'll second you.
Would you second that motion? I will make the motion to accept 1175 as written.
77.
77.
Excuse me, as written, and with great appreciation.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion relative to this ordinance? Yes, Bob?
I would like to make several motions to amend the budget concerning various line items. The first one would be 100-111-3510 legal services. The ordinance requests, do I explain it before I make the motion, or, okay?
That'd be
Okay. The ordinance requests a plus up from the 2012 budget amount of $62,500 to $80,000, and then continues this $80,000 amount in 2013, this present budget, and probably for the future, but we don't have that. And so I ask for the justification for this increase. The justification provided is we have reduced the number of traffic citation warnings this year in hopes of greater compliance, i.e. we are writing more tickets. With more tickets comes greater prosecution costs. My comment was that, you know, generally when you are issuing more tickets, you get a lot more fines. And so if you have prosecution costs going up, you're also getting fines and court fees going up. And so I compared what you were proposing as increases in fines, and there was like nothing. I mean, like a couple $1,000s. And so we were doing a lot of prosecution. We're paying prosecutors, but we weren't getting any more fines and revenues, barely. And basically, we're paying twice as much for prosecutions and court costs as we are collecting in revenues to cover that. Now, we must be the only city in Colorado where, to talk to the people in Alma or in Morrison or something like that, we're not a city that's going to be doing that kind of traffic enforcement. But generally, there should be something a little closer as to when you're going to, have a prosecutor go out. Maybe he should be doing a little more plea bargaining as opposed to taking these cases to court and spending a lot of time on them. And so, anyway, I didn't want to have to spend more money for a prosecutor to go after more additional enforcement when it wasn't paying for itself. And so, in line with that, I make a motion to reduce this line item for.
You want to amend the motion. You want to have an amendment.
Have an amendment
to make a particular change.
Yes, to move that to reduce this line item from $80,000 to $64,375, which is the amount in the 2012 budget plus 3% inflation that we applied to all the manpower line items in the budget. So that's my motion.
Do we have a second? Hearing no second, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay. Let's see where I'm going. The next one would be 100-111-3520 legal fees. The 2013 budget includes $50,000 for a lawyer to review and update our city code. I ask that this be justified why spending this $50,000 is in the taxpayer's interest. And why can't we continue to update the code as situations arise, just as we've been doing for years, and in fact have done this evening. Planning Department has made some major changes in the code tonight. And in fact, we had the Police Department come in with the code on. So this is happening with the existing staff all the time. But I believe the response was that in its goals and objectives session, we placed a high priority on code revision. The budget did not propose doing all that was initially proposed in the goals and objectives session. Intentional improvement, which is what the council wanted, takes intentional investment. When we were going through the goals and objectives, we were coming up with a lot of brainstorming. Okay, we say, well, let's do this. Think about that. This was the first goals and objectives I had been to. Okay, I understood that when I said, yeah, let's let it go through, that meant that when he saw it in the budget, there would be detailed justification of what would be involved in, what guidance would we be giving, almost like a business plan as to the justification as why you would need to do this. Well, we don't have it. We just have a number in the budget. There's no additional information other than that this was a nice thing to have. Anyway, in the absence of that detailed justification, now Gary is the one I think that brought this up in goals and objectives, and he had mentioned talking about changing the ordinances had to do with jail terms. Well, I did a search of the code earlier today, and I could probably have an ordinance that covers that by our first meeting in January, getting rid of all the jail sentences and stuff like that.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that you want to make sure, and it's the reason, a lot of the code, different things that you change affects other things. And that's one of the things you got to do is, one, you want to make sure that you have all the right words. I mean, I can write something as a layman that might get us in real trouble as it being our, part of our code. And so therefore you need to have some legal review. And so, I look at that. But I would like, before you make a motion, I would like give David an opportunity to kind of give his perspective and any other council, comments that we might have.
Absolutely. The intent for that plus-up was to meet one of the objectives that the council, I thought, set at goals and objectives, and the specifics are listed on page I in the budget from the goals and objectives session to include charter and code review, the affordable housing plan, the business task force, adjust monthly stormwater fees. All those things are included in that plus-up. So I thought that I was funding something that was of importance to the council. What Sally brought forward tonight as an adjustment to the code was a relatively simple thing to do, but it did take Aaron some time to review that, and there were fees associated with that. So as the mayor states, we can collectively do our best to adjust codes, but I'm going to rely on the city attorney to keep us out of trouble. And so these costs are really primarily for that review or the process that it takes to cause that review to occur. So certainly if the council as a group has no desire to move forward with this, we'll continue to do this piecemeal as we can. But as I said in my response to you, if we're going to have intentional improvement, it takes a dedication of intentional funds.
But my preferred approach would be for those that are interested in a particular subject, and it may be with the planning department on what we just discussed earlier today. They're the experts on that subject. It may be Gary that says, I don't want people to have to go to jail, and then we could look at that, individuals. Well, I'm more inclined to having people that are interested in this subject reviewing it and then giving it to Aaron to take a look at to whether or not this conflicts with other requirements.
And there's no argument from me at that point, as I indicated in the second email with that. But at the end of the day, I want our attorney to do the final work on that, and that's what these were intended to cover.
Mr. Mayor, may I suggest, I think I understand what the rest of the council does as it relates to this particular issue. If we want to debate this issue, we can. I don't know if I need more information.
Okay.
Okay.
So do you have a motion?
I make the motion to reduce that line item by $50,000.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes.
for the record, I think, and you got your parliamentary procedure book, that when a motion fails because it didn't get a second, I do think that we want that on the record.
Oh, it is. It is in the record.
Would he have to state that the motion fails because of lack of second?
I thought that's what I did, but
Did he?
that the amendment, there was no second, so it can't move forward for a vote. If there's no second, it cannot move forward for a vote.
Understood. I was just asking for the record, do we want it to be stated that it did fail?
It didn't fail for a vote. It failed to receive a second to move forward. And that's what we stated, and that's in the minutes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, what we're doing is adequate. It fails for lack of second.
Yep.
So, but I think the record is.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm still going to work through it.
Okay.
No. The third, well, there are two line items. Well, actually, a number of line items that pertain to increased staffing levels. And these staffing levels, once you hire somebody permanently, they go on and on, years after year. So I was particularly concerned about, in the absence of having an O&M plan that shows what our expenditures are going to be over the coming years compared to potential resources coming in. Especially, I think this budget proposes an overall 5% increase in the non-capital type of expenses, whereas our inflation is under 2%, or the revenue increases like 2%. So it doesn't take too many years for this to get caught up. So anyway, I was concerned with bringing on additional staff, when in fact many cities are laying off staff, but that's our county being one of them too. But so the line items that I looked at were basically 100-112-1100 administrative wages, salaries permanent, and for this one it was and then the next one is 100-113-1200, and this has to do with the deputy city clerk and the court clerk. You know, in the past, Suzanne has done an admirable job of being both positions, the deputy and the court clerk. And during this potential transition time, that we needed additional manpower during the transition that would allow our deputy court clerk to learn more about the city clerk position. And so I fully supported the manpower increase, or the man-hour increases that were required during the transition period. But the intention of the city is that once this transition is complete, we have, instead of a city clerk and a deputy city clerk that does the deputy position and the clerk, we will have three positions. We'll have the city clerk, we'll have a deputy city clerk, and we'll have a court clerk. So that's one additional FTE, or maybe it's at part-time. Okay.
I'll address your comments when you're done.
Okay, so maybe you can clarify then how much additional manpower that you're asking for in this then.
Correct, I can do that. What we requested from a court clerk perspective was a 20-hour per week position as a part-time position.
Okay.
The transition isn't a potential transition. It is something that's absolutely going to occur. So we have our city clerk for another year or so, and in that time period, in this next year, Suzanne is going to be focusing her attentions on learning as much as she can about that city clerk position to take advantage of all of Cindy's 30 years of knowledge. Currently, Suzanne spends between 20 to 25 hours per week as the court clerk. Up until probably 6 months ago, we had actually a deputy court clerk, and we have other backups within the system that allowed Suzanne to pass off some of the responsibilities. Due to just turnover, those folks are gone, and Suzanne has been functioning as the sole clerk, court clerk, with Cindy as her backup. And so we're kind of switching the roles a little bit. I need Suzanne to focus over the course of a year cycle on learning as much as she can to become the city clerk. And as she's doing that, I need to backfill behind that with the court clerk responsibilities. And currently, she's very talented at it and is spending 20 to 25 hours per week doing that. So I need some supplemental help to do that. Your comment about it lasting forever, don't know if that's the case or not. Part-time positions can go away. They don't always. I worry very much about staffing creep. I worry very much about other types of creeps within organizations, and I'll address your comment about increasing staffing levels as we get to the other positions. But this is one that allows us to make sure that we continue providing continuous good service to our customers. The city clerk's position is extremely important, and I can't have that position being diluted by the important work of a court clerk.
Okay. Well, based on your explanation there, then I have no motion with regard to those two positions.
But Bob, I appreciate your scrutiny and understanding what your background was with the Department of Defense. I believe that you have the bona fides to make this kind of an examination of the budget. But in the case of the part-time clerk, court clerk position, as well as the other issues that you brought up, all of those were discussed in our goals and objectives sessions, and I don't know why we're revisiting them now, since we've already agreed that those were our priorities.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
My understanding of the goals and objectives session was that it was a preliminary of wish list for what the types of things we would want to see potentially in the budget. It wasn't, and as I expressed in the goals and objectives at the time, when we came for additional manpower, I wanted to have justification for it, not just, oh, you said in the goals and objectives we could have one more person, because there was no discussion in the goals and objectives for that.
I'm actually going to disagree with that comment, because I felt in the goals and objectives, which is a public work session, that we did discuss that, and I thought that was laid out. It is not, it is a work session, and we do not go through an approval process, but we do give sort of a consensus and direction to the staff to proceed and work that into the budget, and that's what they've done, and that's the budget that we've been reviewing. And so all of those things, including I think the other positions that relative to bringing back on, for example, one of the folks that works in Parks, Buildings, and Grounds, it's not a new position. It's actually a position, I'm jumping ahead, but it's a position that has existed, was not filled because of budgetary constraints, that we wanted to make sure that we were building up our reserve and had kind of a safety margin relative to our finances. But at the same time, I will say, and I talk with David about this regularly. I see it in the county and I see it in the city. When you're short a person, there are certain things that aren't being done, and I know that in this case, Bill, and that list grows, and therefore, at least I understand, and I thought from our goals and objectives and what David explained, why we were moving forward.
Then I won't question those on the roads and the parks and that sort of thing. I did want to question one that I don't think we talked about in the goals and objectives, and that was the code enforcement officer. Okay. And so that would be my final comment, I guess.
And I will say, I appreciate the hard work, the scrutiny that you give this. And I mean, I know you're working really hard on the budget. And so I think, what you're seeing is, all of us, we're 7 different individuals that sit up here. We have different levels of information that's required, and it takes a majority to pass the budget as presented. So yes, please go ahead.
I realized that probably all of these would be shot down, but I would still make the effort.
No, that's okay. But please go ahead.
Because you did reference my DOD background. Several people have, and certainly whenever I wanted to hire more people.
Let's go back to the items that we're discussing in our budget.
Okay. The next one would be 100-114-1200. That's planning wages, salaries part-time. And this is for, the increase for this line item is basically due to adding 10 hours per week for the code enforcement officer. This city council last year agreed to a 20-hour week for the code enforcement officer, and we felt that was sufficient. And so I asked the city manager to justify this, and his statement was, our code enforcement officer has made some gains in some code areas. He is still in the reactionary mode, i.e. responding mostly to complaints, and not in the proactive mode, i.e. enforcing other codes throughout the city. And my response to that was, at our last council meeting, our city manager advised that the code enforcement officer would remain in the reactionary mode and not actively go out and find non-compliance issues unless somebody complained about it. In other words, staying in the reactionary mode. He would respond to complaints. And so based on that, and I agree with that approach, is that we shouldn't be going out looking for trouble. I think that there's enough to do by responding to complaints. And so I am making the motion then to reduce this line item by $6,302 to $20,312, which allows for a 3% increase over the 2012 budget amount.
I'm actually going to second this one because
Was that a motion,
Yes,
an amendment? Okay.
I'm going to second this one. You know, I have a little bit of difficulty as it relates to, I think there's a role for code enforcement officer, but I don't necessarily like the fact that we're going to go out and police any more than we have to. And so a part-time role, I think, is adequate, and so I will support this motion.
And for discussion on that, when this will be a question for David. When an individual moves from a 20 to a 30-hour work week, is there also an increase in cost of benefits and things that goes with it? What kind of a change does that make them? They're still a part-time employee?
They are permanent part-time. Well, they're permanent part-time at 20 or 30 hours. It doesn't matter, but their benefits kick in at 30 hours.
They're considered a full-time employee, an FTE, at 30 hours, according to our personnel manual, and they do qualify for prorated benefits, meaning their contribution to the cost is shared at a prorated basis.
Yeah, this isn't a huge issue for us. Our code enforcement officer has been doing research on skateboarders on sidewalks along Main Street. He's been looking at snow removal on sidewalks. He's been looking at weed control, things like that. And that's what I mean by proactive. I don't mean that we're going to go out and hunt down issues. At 20 hours a week, he's barely able to keep up with things that are brought to him. The idea was not to become, as I recall, Mayor Pro Tem Smith stating about being the code Nazis. We don't have any intention of doing that. It's just to try to provide a better service. This is not a big issue for us. We just wanted something that we could do that would make it a bit better for the community.
And just for discussion, I'll add a comment because I was on council when we brought the code enforcement part-time back on. I've always been kind of lukewarm on that from a personal point of view. And I actually, if Eric hadn't seconded, I would have seconded this one. So,
Do we still share our code enforcement officer with another municipality?
No. That individual that we hired initially as our code enforcement officer did work for Manitou Springs in parking enforcement. He also drove a bus. So he was making ends meet by working several different jobs. He's gone. We hired a replacement who also is, I think he's a senior police officer who retired, and he does this part-time because he enjoys the interaction with the community. And it's the only job that he has.
Okay, thank you.
If I can make one more comment, and I've said this before, but since it's on the record, I don't like the word permanent employees. We do not have any permanent employees because if we throw that terminology around, it'll make it very difficult if we ever had to make a decision on an employee if they feel like they have a permanent position.
In other words, it's not a position for life.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think in the labor laws and labor court, there have been rulings that have favored employees who have been let go that were given a permanent employment position.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to change this line item in 100-114-1200 for it to not increase from 20 to 30 hours per week. And any further discussion on that? Then we will take a vote on that amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Rivera?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Harrison?
No.
Harvey?
No.
Smith?
Yes.
And Turley.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-2.
So we'll drop that line item to, I think the number you stated was 20308.
And then there will be associated healthcare and all the other
Reductions. Sure.
too.
So we're maintaining at the level that we were.
Correct.
Okay? Yes, Bob?
Next year, I'll pay a lot more attention at goals and objectives.
Well, it is an important time for us. And of course, going back, it was for the audience and everyone, that goals and objectives sessions, brand new council members, 4 new members, a new mayor. And so, we do learn. And I think going back to Terry's comments on the 2013 budget, the budget has grown, the fidelity of information that's provided has increased. So anyone else on council? We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 1177. Any further discussion or comments?
One question.
Yes, sir.
Kelly, after this passes, will you put all this in this book for me?
Sure.
Thank
I'd
you.
be happy to.
Well, my comment, you already know, I want the final PDF version.
I will send that to all of you,
'cause that's-
as well as it will be posted on the
Keeping that
website.
electronically. Any other comments? Then we will take a vote.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Carlson?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes, and thank you.
Smith?
Yes.
Turley?
Yes.
Rivetto?
Yes, with the revision that we just had.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very good. I thank everyone involved in the process. I will second what Terry has said. And I think the comments that we've had, and I think inputs from Gary, I think as we work through the next year and work on preparing for 2014 and execution of 2013, I think we'll be making more improvements. So I thank everyone on that. We have one other public hearing for tonight. This is to approve ordinance number 1175, amending chapters 6, well, there's several chapters. I'll let Scott go through those, of the municipal code related to the keeping of domestic fowl. And for that, I will turn it to Scott Woodford. I was going to say something about it.
Fire up the presentation here. Okay, this is the public hearing portion of Ordinance 1175 to amend Chapters 6, 18, Chapter 6 and 18 of the Municipal Code related to the keeping of domestic fowl. You'll recall on November 15th we had the initial posting, and I went through the ordinance in pretty good detail. We had a spirited discussion on the merits of the ordinance. And tonight, what I wanted to do was just to make the statement that this did not come from staff's desire to see a chicken ordinance be put into place. This was based on considerable community input, people calling from time to time over a certain period of about a year or so. And then the submission of a petition signed by 70 folks. So that's where this came from. Just wanted to remind you of that. And based on that, we had 3 work sessions with the Planning Commission and looked at ordinances from other communities, which we used to help craft our ordinance. I wasn't planning to walk through the ordinance again. I think that unless you guys would like that, I think you know what the details of it are. And I would just remain available for questions on that. And then I did want to respond to a question I think that Ms. Harvey had about the covenants and how that affected the ordinance. When we were writing the ordinance, we did some research to see what subdivisions had ordinances, or I'm sorry, covenants that restricted having domestic fowl and other types of animals in the subdivisions. And there were quite a few. Wouldn't say that we necessarily have the exhaustive list of all covenants in the area, but we have quite a few of them. So what this map here, I blacked out areas where this ordinance would not apply in Woodland Park, and it's a combination of areas that have subdivisions that have covenants that prohibit domestic fowl. It also takes out areas that wouldn't be zoned properly for this use. The only three zones that would be permitted to have FAL are the suburban residential, urban residential, and the PUD if requested at time of approval. So I backed out all those areas in black. So that pretty much leaves the yellow, which is urban residential, and that is the single-family zone district on smaller lots. And then the lighter shades in these areas are suburban residential, which are single-family zone districts on bigger lots. So this is mostly what is left over are the older parts of town that didn't typically have covenants associated with the subdivision.
Can I ask a question along those lines? I guess, one question, and this maybe is more to the city attorney as it relates to covenants. I guess I understand that covenants can be more restrictive, but it's, my question is, for instance, speed limits. Can a community change speed limits? And why not? Because technically they could come in and say, well, we've decided we want to reduce speed limits, and you're going to say, no, government retains that authority. Where is the line between where the government retains authority and covenants kick in? Because to me, I don't necessarily, I think covenants have gotten way out of control, frankly. And to the point that, in my neighborhood, they were going to talk about, including dogs and things of that nature in some of the discussion. And to me, it's just going over the top. And, it's interesting, and I know that we've talked about this in the past. At one time, you had a choice whether you wanted to live in a neighborhood that had covenants or not. And it was through that contract you decided, yes, I'm going to live there. I look at this map, and frankly, if you want to live in Woodland Park, you're almost going to be in a covenant-controlled neighborhood, unless you live in one of the older parts. And, based on that, and what's interesting to me is I think it'd be an interesting case to go forward, especially with the current downturn in the market where it's not easy to freely move from one place to another, that, these covenants have become overly restrictive. And my question is, from a municipality standpoint, we set laws. And, frankly, I would like to see how we could set some laws that some of the citizens of this community could actually benefit from, in this case, and not be restricted because, they live in a neighborhood that they had no idea, or the neighborhood has already reacted, like mine has, and passed or changed the covenants that none of us voted on, but they just, the board decides to do it without, frankly, any input from the people that live there. So I don't know if there's a way we can craft an ordinance that basically says, look, you can't supersede what we're doing here. And if they don't like it, then they can show up and stand out through the door and go through the public process just like anybody else does. And because I look at this map and I think, why are we even talking about chickens versus anything else?
I think your bigger question about ordinances and code versus covenants would be a more all-encompassing issue that we might want to look at it, in the future.
Do we have that power?
Well,
we'll see what.
That's my question.
I mean, the very short answer to that is both the state and federal constitution have a provision called the Constitution or the Contract Clause, and government cannot undo a contract or take action that would impair a contract. So the short answer to that would probably be no, but it probably and could be maybe a much longer answer, and depending on more people who feel like that, and depending on where the policy decisions go. But right now, the short answer to that is no.
So there's no effect we can have as a municipality as it relates. So if, based on that, I guess the neighborhoods could pass a requirement that nobody drives over the speed limit of 19 miles an hour.
I think the difference there is one of ownership. The covenants, that's a private property issue. Those are the homeowners and their lots.
So if we put this in the right of way, so then we could allow chickens in the right of way, I guess. I mean, you know.
You asked a serious question. I'm trying to give you a serious
Well,
answer.
I'm very serious about that.
I think that would be considered a hazard to our motoring public.
Well, and private property owners don't have any ability to contract with regard to public streets. So if they privatize their city streets, their roads, they can pass or covenants that would control the speed on those.
You won't get an argument from me as the one who tries to enforce the codes that covenants can be more restrictive, and they are. And some of them seem absolutely ridiculous. My neighborhood, which is in the lower right-hand corner, I suspect has covenants against chickens, but I couldn't find my covenant in time for Scott to update the map. That's why he said it's not perhaps all-inclusive. There may be other neighborhoods that have covenants that don't allow domestic fowl. But we're dealing with the facts as we have them.
So based on this whole discussion in the black on the map, it almost seems to me that I'm almost falling back to Gary's feeling here that we probably shouldn't have any regulation as it relates to chickens. If people want to have chickens and their covenants allow, let them have chickens, because frankly, there's hardly any area you can have chickens in town as it stands anyway. And if those neighborhoods don't like it, well, then they can go either form a neighborhood association if they don't have one to go fight the chickens.
I don't think the staff or even the folks that brought this to the staff, it's an issue of yes or no with chickens. If the council says, yeah, let's have domestic fowl, I think the concern is the guidelines associated with them. What's a reasonable number? What's a reasonable size of a coop? What's a reasonable setback from somebody else's backyard? Reasonable people can make reasonable decisions and conclusions. Unfortunately, a lot of our codes aren't written for that reasonable person. They're written for the one who might want to have excess. So that's what my focus isn't to allow or not allow. It's if we allow them, let's just make sure that we're not taking away from somebody else's joy of living in this town as well.
Well, it seems like that's already occurred as it relates to covenants.
Okay. I'd like to move on.
But
Bob?
Just
Bob
quickly, you
has a
should move
question.
to our neighborhood. I'm the head of the Architectural Control Committee, in other words, the code enforcement officer. And being a very pragmatic person, we had things like no swings in the backyard, no playground equipment. I changed that. We weren't allowed to have more than 2 dogs. I changed that. I mean,
Bob, I would really like us to get focused back on what the business before us is tonight.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say here is that I think that same philosophy that apply at the city level is that we need to back off regulations to the degree possible. And the problem with what's left on that map is you got a lot of donut holes in there that we can't pass any laws about anyway. You can have somebody whose lot is in Teller County but not the city, and they could have all kinds of animals in there. And disturbing everybody around them.
Again, let's get back to the point of what our ordinance that we're considering tonight.
Well, my position, which was expressed last meeting, is that people should be able to raise domestic animals so long as it doesn't violate one of the other ordinances on noise and that sort of stuff. So health, safety, those types of things.
Okay.
We don't need a specific ordinance banning certain types of domestic animals or permitting certain animals. As far as I'm concerned, if the language in the ordinances are moot on a subject, then it's permitted. If you want to ban something, then you need to specifically ban.
You're incorrect. And I asked the attorney
yes,
to
Carol,
give us.
please.
Well, I asked Erin if she would give us the. We talked about it at the last meeting in the first reading of the ordinance. If an action is not specifically permitted, then it is prohibited. And I thought that we left here with a vague understanding of that concept. So I asked Erin to provide all of us with that interpretation, and if Erin could do the same again for
And I guess
public
maybe
hearing.
before Aaron does that, I would just suggest that cats are not spelled out in the code in any way, shape, or form. And based on that, cats are not allowed in Woodland Park. So I'll
That,
yield that to.
and that wouldn't bother me a bit.
And we actually have two different legal questions that I'll address. The first is, what does our code say? How does our code handle uses that are not specifically itemized in the table of permitted uses in the zoning code? And what the code says is essentially that those uses are on hold until the council decides how to treat them process-wise. They could be treated, council could decide that those would be treated on a case-by-case basis, having to go through a conditional use process. There were, I think, 70-some proponents of the petition, and so I think in this particular instance, that didn't seem that it would be very efficient from staff's point of view to have 70 people go through a conditional use permit process, to have to go to the planning commission and then come to the council to have their chicken or fowl operation on their property. So that's the first question. If not specifically set out in the table of permitted uses, it comes to council with a recommendation from staff on what the process should be. That's the first question. The second question, and somewhat rhetorical, I think, but maybe not really, is this question of whether or not it's allowed in the table of permitted uses. And if you look at the table of permitted uses, there are a number of specified uses, but there are also accessory uses. And our code says that every principal use has so many accessory uses that are also allowed as a use by right. It doesn't go on to define every accessory use. So you don't have, for instance, in the residential district, a section in the code that says accessory uses will include a dog house, 2 dogs, less than 3, and implicitly the code does provide that, because the minute you get up to 3 dogs, you then have a kennel under our code.
4.
So 3 dogs are not an accessory use in the residential area. So implicitly that is in the code. But what the question becomes with the fowl use the question becomes whether or not that is an accessory use to a residential use in the city of Woodland Park. And if you look at the code definition, and this is pretty typical for most codes in the state of Colorado and follows Colorado law on the issue, if you look at the code definition of accessory use, you get this. The municipal code states that an accessory use means a use or structure naturally and normally incidental to, subordinate to, and devoted exclusively to the main use of the land or buildings. And so, yes, it becomes a question of interpretation as to what is an accessory use. You know, when you are making that interpretation and you're using the guidance of that definition, you have to look at the controlling words, and those are naturally and normally incidental to. And, you know, I would submit that in most urbanized areas, and you could make it, you know, there could be a disagreement over how urbanized Woodland Park is, but in most urbanized areas, to date, the keeping of fowl is probably not natural and normal. Now, it may certainly be sometime in the future, but that would be my interpretation of that accessory use definition as applied to the chicken use. I don't believe it's normal and natural at this point. And so, thus, this process follows. And we are where we are because we're following the code. We're at the point where we got to because that's where the code directs us.
Yeah, I guess my only, you know, and I appreciate that. You know, I look at City and County of Denver, passed. City of Colorado Springs, passed. Many other municipalities, passed. I would argue that it is natural, normal, and that has become the trend in our society. Just like dog houses are accessory use or allowed without a permit, and that swing sets, tree houses, I guess, I don't know whether they are or not, I guess that could offend a neighbor, so maybe not, but, I mean, people have all these uses already, and so I think it's a very slippery slope for us to say what's natural or not natural. And, you know, like I said, to say that because it's not in our code, it's not allowed, or it's not in the table it does not specifically state that I can have a doghouse. So how do I know that I can have a doghouse? Because
accessory uses are allowed in the code. That's the point.
Right.
So if it falls under accessory use, it's allowed.
So I think
the
that
question
we
for
should
the-
change our code to have this fall under accessory use, and then we're done.
Well,
And-
if the council
And council can absolutely do that.
Sure, if the council determines that a chicken coop is an accessory use, end of story. But I think that's to me, that's the more slippery slope. But if you carte blanche, do nothing, I think that's the part that would be quite the struggle for us.
And maybe we'll get Bob wanted to make a comment. We'll get that, and maybe we can go ahead, open up for public comment and see what folks that are here would like to tell us about that. Yes, Bob.
No, I'm willing to wait for the public comment.
Okay.
I'm wondering if Scott's got any more. Because I have some questions for Aaron, but I'll wait until after the public comment.
Okay.
Well, actually, my only other real comment was to note that even though some of these are blacked out as noting that they have covenants that restrict domestic fowl, a lot of these homeowners associations are not active, so they may not even be enforcing their rules. So just wanted to make that point, that may open up more, may or may not open up more opportunities for people to have domestic fowl in Woodland Park. But I know there are some people in the public that would like to speak. So.
Before we go to public comment, I had another question for Scott. Why did you intentionally include geese and turkeys? Did you anticipate that those would be included in residential neighborhoods as well? Was there a reason to make it all inclusive?
I think it's in accordance with some of the other definitions from other communities that we saw, because I know that there are some folks that like to keep geese and turkeys and other things in addition to just chickens. So those are other birds that are similar in size and impact as a chicken. So I think that's why it was included.
And the recommended limit on domestic fowl would be all inclusive. It wouldn't
Correct.
be 6 chickens, 6 geese, 6
That's
geese a laying.
Yeah, 6 of anything,
All
of
right.
any of those.
Yes, Terry.
Scott, you made the comment that about
The associations themselves, that the areas that are blacked out, and the majority of those are areas that have homeowners associations, active or non-active. But I mean, you didn't have time to go through all of their covenants and find out if some of those blacked out areas may or may not allow what we have decided of turning farm animals into domestic fowl. So we don't know if some of those areas actually say no to chickens. True?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question. I did go through
All
quite
of the
a few.
areas that are blacked out have covenants that say that the homeowners in their covenants disallow chickens.
That's correct. I just want to make sure you understand that these black areas include areas in addition to those subdivisions. It blacks out commercial areas, areas zoned multifamily, areas that are zoned PUD that were already approved under a certain PUD not to allow chickens. So those black areas incorporate more than just the subdivisions that have covenants that don't allow them.
Ultimately, when you look at this, if you see yellow, we're not aware of a covenant that would prevent domestic fowl from being there.
At this time, I'd like to open the meeting to public comment. And I have one person signed up, and I will then allow others. I would ask as you come, state your name, address, and concisely tell us what you'd like for us to hear. And first, I'll call upon Mr. Lee Willoughby. Welcome, Lee.
I am here to, Lee Willoughby, 760 Pinion Ridge Drive. Okay. And I'm also going to follow the admonition or suggestion that I be brief and constructive. And I'm going to be positive. And what I want to tell you is that my support for backyard chickens has nothing to do with a fascination with chickens, and I don't think that other people who are approaching the city to request, is it permissible, etc., are so much single-minded. What I'm telling you is there's a very positive movement going on in this community, as all over our country, where people are starting to take responsibility for their health. And they're doing it through increased activity and paying attention to what they eat. What I see happening in our community that's great is that in the schools, not only is nutrition becoming a part of the education process and a purpose of the food service in the schools, but kids are being introduced to gardening experiences. That's either happening or being planned to happening with raised beds, with greenhouses. Families all over this town have increased dramatically the amount of gardening that they're doing. They're trying to control the quality of their food and engage the family by growing their own food. I mean, it doesn't taste any better than out of your backyard. It can't be more nutritious than harvested. Same thing for eggs. You add backyard chickens to your gardening, and now you've got a good source of protein, and it's fresh. And kids love doing that kind of thing. I do fear that if this ordinance doesn't pass, we're going to be left as a community where we are now. You can't have chickens in your backyard. Now, I'm not in a position to say, oh, you're misinterpreting that. No, I don't think that's the positive way to look at it. By the ordinance, you establish what the boundaries are. Some people say the best purpose of a good fence is making good neighbors. You spell out what the boundaries are. Okay, I promise to be brief. I hope you approve this.
Thanks, Lee. Anyone else that would like to come and testify? Yes, Brian. Please state your name and address and
I don't know my address.
Share your comments.
Brian Fleer, Woodland RV Park, City of Woodland Park Economic Development Office. Aaron, quick question, because we spoke a lot about covenants, and I always get concerned from the economic development perspective, land use particularly. I notice a lot of the area in black would either be zoned out or would be within the covenant. If somebody comes in a proper zoning district with a ZDP request, but it's got a covenant restriction, we still have to issue that ZDP request. Is that a fair assessment? Even if it's not allowed within the covenant, we still, as a municipality jurisdiction, have to issue the ZDP if it's within the standards of the ordinance for that zoning district.
Yeah, the question is really what's the city's practice with respect to private covenants, and they don't take a position on enforcing private covenants. So the city would not be in a position to deny the permit on the basis of the covenant.
It's important because this has come up before, not with chickens, and I really don't have a chicken in the fight, so to speak, but it is important to make that distinction because we do have other land use where it could be there might be a covenant restriction, and it usually happens in light industrial or multifamily or something like that, or maybe a commercial zoning, not necessarily a single family. So I think it's important just to make that distinction for the record.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Anyone else for public comment? Norma.
You're going to throw eggs?
Do we have to take over writing notes for you? Oh, okay. You're going to quote yourself?
Please give us your name and address and your comments.
My name is Norma Engelberg. I live at 2732 West Bijou Street in Colorado Springs, and I have ducks and chickens in my backyard. The Colorado Springs the language that allows me to do that is 2 paragraphs, and I brought visual aids. These are the largest. These are the largest of my chicken and duck layers. This is the reason I have chickens and ducks in my backyard. My ducks and chickens do not have antibiotics. They don't have growth hormones. They live on as natural nutritional supplements as I can afford to give them. They eat weeds from my garden, and these are as fresh as you can get. These came out of the coop this morning. Although actually probably yesterday, because my ducks and chickens are late layers. They don't lay in the morning. But I've had ducks and chickens before. I've been very careful this time about making sure the coop wouldn't allow a fox in. But we're doing pretty well now, and I get 4 eggs a day, 4 chicken eggs a day, and 3 duck eggs every day, and so it doesn't take long. And now I'm giving eggs away to friends and relatives. But this is the reason. This is the reason because I can control what they eat, and I can control what I eat. Okay. 2 paragraphs would be nice.
Thank you, Ms. Norma. Yes, please come forward.
My name's Kim Park. I live at 808 North Walnut, which is not in the covenanted part of Woodland Park. And we have had neighbors around us who have had many chickens, and we never knew until we decided to get chickens this last spring. And we did that because of what Lee spoke about and Norma, for health reasons, so that we could raise our own chickens, have our own eggs. We're pretty committed to our health, and I find it amusing, really, that this is even an issue, because I am so bothered by neighbors' dogs up and down the street barking, starting at 4:30 or 5 in the morning in the summer, that I have to shut my window so that I'm not hearing them all the time, all throughout the day, into the night. And my chickens are so quiet. They don't bother anybody. They don't smell. We're very clean with them because I don't like nastiness on my eggs. And so we clean the coop all the time. We don't make noise. But the dogs in the neighborhood are quite annoying. So I don't understand the issue for not even allowing chickens. So, and the fact that Woodland Park, talking about the urban and suburban areas, that's even an issue when Denver allows them. Colorado Springs, there have been several articles in the past few months from the Colorado Springs Gazette about raising chickens and the health benefits and just the pleasure, actually, that you get from chickens. I'm not an animal lover at all, and my friends think it's very funny that I have chickens, but they are quite a delight to our family. The health benefits are great, and so I just wanted to put in my 2 cents worth for that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. DeVoe.
Egg on my face, and that's not a yoke. John DeVoe, 940 East Kelly's Road, member of the Planning Commission.
Welcome, John.
This is not an anti-chicken ordinance, okay? One of the reasons that Woodland Park has done so well is it's called design standards. We have design standards in this community. Whether it's a Walmart that goes up and does a really nice job because Colorado Springs doesn't have design standards, or it's what we do here for everything that's built. This ordinance isn't to prevent anybody from having chickens. You can have chickens, and I agree with them with what's going on. But in the case of dogs she talks about, we have ordinance for that. If the dog barks for more than so many minutes, call the police. Because we've already set the standards of what's permissible and what isn't. All this ordinance does is say, and this is an ordinance, if you guys read your packet, there's 16 cities on here. Denver, Colorado Springs, they're all on here. They all have that. Why do they have that? Because you put on this thing in this ordinance. What's the size of it? Can you have 100 chickens with the chicken wire fence in the backyard? 200 chickens? Where do you draw the line? You have right now, you could have as many as you wanted to. This says 6 chickens. Okay, that's 4 dozen of eggs a week. Okay? If you eat more than that, then I get your neighbor to raise them too. But I mean, all this does is set what the building's going to look like. It's got to be compatible with the surroundings in your home. It says the square footage of the yard. It says the setbacks. So where's it going to be? Okay, it's simple things like that. It's nothing to stop people from doing that. And the people that raise chickens know for sure you don't raise them cheaper than if you go down to the grocery store and buy them. They cost more to raise. But you're doing that for health reasons, antibiotics. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But where you folks that live in, and I'm sure a number of you here, have covenants where you can't have them. I don't. Who's going to protect me? Are you going to allow roosters? Every one of these ordinance doesn't, because of the noise it's created. I suppose instead of a dog barking at 4:30, you could have a rooster crowing. But what I'm saying is all this was meant for was to control and kind of guidelines of what people can do if they want to do that. That's all. It's not to stop somebody from growing that. We got enough of those in a community. I think the people that came forward to planning and said, tell us what to do, is they don't want to already make an investment to do that. And then the problem they're going to have is that maybe, they change it and say you got to take it down. We don't want people to do that. So I think grow all the chickens you want, but do it with some kind of a guideline so what the building standards are in our community. It's no more difficult than that. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, John. Anyone else? Seeing none.
One more.
Oh, is there? Oh, yes, please, come forward. Sorry.
My name is Anna Weiland, and I live at 1023 Mateo Camino. And I just wanted to say I support having chickens in Colorado Springs. One thing that I noticed this summer that I feel brought our neighborhood together was gardening. There's a few of my neighbors that started gardens this last summer, and because they were out in their yards gardening, we got to be friends. And I think it's a really nice neighborly thing to do. So I'm in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Thank you very much. We'll now close the public hearing. Any further discussion by council? Yes.
I have a more serious question. Although gardening might be the next thing we have to take up, because I don't know if that's an accessory use or not, or a greenhouse. Second thing I would ask, or the question I would ask is, what do we do about folks that currently have structures? Are they grandfathered, and how are we going to handle that?
I don't know the answer to that. I would suspect that what we would do is we would canvass those who might. I would talk to the parks and ask them how many chickens do they have, how many do their neighbors have, and see. I don't know. I'd have to consult with the city attorney to see how we would handle that.
Isn't that something that we should maybe address in this ordinance? So that we don't have ambiguity?
Or a follow-on ordinance. I mean, I don't know that it's necessary that you address it here. I think, technically those would be non-conforming uses because the code states that a use that's not permitted is put on hold until council decides what the process is for allowing it. So those would be non-conforming, and they would technically, with no action by council, have to conform to the provisions of the code.
I thought if you had a non-conforming use, though, after something was passed, that it could stay that way until you made substantial improvements that increased the value more than 50%.
If it's a non-conforming legal use.
Okay.
If it was allowed, and then the zoning changed after it was allowed.
One of the things from a grandfathering or legal nonconforming, you can never increase the magnitude of the nonconforming aspect of that. So if someone had 8 chickens and this was passed at 6, they could not increase it to 9, for example, just because they had in excess of what was allowed. They can't make it worse.
Other comments? Yes, Gary.
Thank you for coming to me, finally.
It's the first time I've seen your hand.
I'm sorry, I've been hogging.
As it currently exists right now, if we do nothing, does that prohibit someone from having chicken in their yards?
It would require us to go through this all over again, because the code says that without it being listed, the development application or the use application comes to the staff.
What do we need to do to change that, as we're indicating before, to allow everything?
Pass this ordinance.
And that you'll have another opportunity. I'm actually going to make a motion that we approve ordinance number 1175, amending chapter 6.04, 18.06, 18.09, and 18.33 of the municipal code related to the keeping of domestic fowl. I will just make a comment as a part of that I believe that moving forward with this will benefit a number of folks in our community, and if there's additional adjustments and things that need to be made, we can do those in the future.
If you're looking for a second, I will do that, Mr. Mayor, but
Finish my discussion, but you know.
You'll have an opportunity to continue.
I would second the motion, but I did have an amendment to the ordinance as it's written. How do we entertain that amendment?
Well, what I would suggest, since we have a second, Gary has additional comments, that we listen to those, and then if somebody wants to make a motion to amend the ordinance as written, we can do that just like we were previously. We'd have an amendment, a motion to amend, a second, discussion, and a vote on that amendment.
Okay.
Yes, Gary.
Well, I just, I'm still confused with this. I'm of the belief that if, instead of doing the negative, in other words, I'm one that believes that everything's allowed unless it affects significantly the health, welfare, and safety of the residents in the area.
If
we can handle that.
Let me just clear up something real quick. The city attorney has retracted the statement that she made a few weeks ago, that if it's not listed explicitly, it's not permitted.
And
what
she
has
said it's
said,
on hold, which is something else.
What she has said is that it then kicks in a process.
Yeah.
And so let's quit talking about the fact that it's prohibited unless allowed. That's not the case. It would have to come through a process. So that's a very important distinction for the rest of the discussion.
But it actually puts it on hold then.
It does.
I'm still of the belief that, it should be allowed unless we have another, but that's another discussion. If by passing this ordinance here, we make it possible for people to have chickens here, I'm all for it, obviously. I'm just not for dictating how many chickens and what's the size of the coop and what color the coop should be and all that stuff. I have a problem with that. I think we have certain property rights that I'd like to, keep available, make it force here. So I have if this will satisfy those people, so they can have their 6 chickens, fine. But I don't want to have put restrictions on that. I don't want to say, why 6? Why not 7? Why not 8? Well, I just don't have this big thing. You mentioned the size of the coop and the dimensions. Now we got to get a planning guy in here and an architect and an engineer and all that stuff to build a chicken coop. I don't want that to happen.
Well, I'm going to respond to that because I get your point up to a certain point. But when you move over to the exaggeration of getting an engineer and all that, I think
We have
you're,
a design
but
standard for the
you're
coops.
doing that to make a point, and I understand that, but a little bit
But they have a
over the
design
top, in
standard
my
exactly
opinion.
what the coop should
Yeah.
look like.
Yes, Terry?
And I guess this is a question for staff. Why are we requiring the ZDP for a chicken coop? I just don't understand. We don't require one for other domains of other domestic animals, I guess.
The county does.
Terry, it's because we require, like if somebody wants to build a shed, an accessory structure like a shed right now, they are required to have a ZDP because we have to review to make sure it's not into the setback or built into an easement or built too high. So they have to come in for sheds already. It's a pretty simple review. It's administrative. It usually takes a couple days. It's $34, and the review is intended to make sure they don't put it in their neighbor's setback or in the wrong spot or too tall.
Well, understood, but they could do the same thing with a doghouse.
Well, but and I understand your point.
Yeah.
You can argue that, but most dog houses aren't 120 square feet, so they could be.
Understood.
And so, but again, the point was, let's make sure that we don't have a negative impact on neighbors.
And I agree with that. And most of you know, I absolutely wanted nothing to do with this chicken. But you know, and I love farm fresh eggs. I really do. I don't love them because they're good for me. I still live on a grease and cigar diet. I love them because they taste good. That's all it is. But and I'm kind of like Gary, and I think I understand what Aaron's statement was, that to kind of clean this up, we have to pass the ordinance, or the people that want to have domestic fowl, whatever they are going to have to go through a more lengthy process to be able to do that legally. Is that correct? And so,
Yes, on a case-by-case basis.
so yeah, that's it. Go ahead.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Carol, did you?
Well, I want to make a recommendation for one amendment, but before I do that, full disclosure, I have kept chickens in my backyard in a residential neighborhood before. I had 3. Well, it was legal in the community I lived in. I had 3. I named them after President Clinton's paramours. I had Paula and Monica and Jennifer. And no, but a fox did. And my Belgium neighbors called the fox Slick Willie because he'd come through every few months and knock off all 3, and I'd get 3 more.
You're giving Rick all kinds of.
But yeah, there's a point here. The point was that they required a certain amount of space, even 3. And it was for their safety and their cleanliness, and that's why I understand the ZDP requirement. I think it is important. You kind of have to, unfortunately, consider the lowest common denominator. But I do think that this is an appropriate ordinance. I'm not in favor of regulating every aspect of our lives in this community, but I do think this is an important one to protect the property rights of those folks who don't want the chickens. So my amendment is to section 18.33.145, subparagraph 3. We talked about this on the first reading where we've got six adult chickens and 6 younger chickens or chicks. Didn't we agree that we were going to keep that at just 6 adults or 6 chickens, period?
Yes, that's my
It
error.
was
That's my error.
suggested, absolutely, but I think we deferred the discussion to tonight.
Right, and I would like to make that amendment, or make the motion to amend that paragraph to simply 6 fowl, because we're not talking about just chickens, unfortunately. I don't want to go down the road of noisy geese, but if other communities are saying geese are as acceptable as chickens, then I guess I can accept that as well. So that's my amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and would you just state that again one more time, just so we'll make sure?
Well, the maximum number of domestic fowl maintained on a property shall not exceed 6.
Okay.
Period.
So that's 18.33.145A3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We have a motion to amend.
I'll second.
And we have a second. Any discussion on the amendment? to make that change.
Why are we limiting 6 chickens? I just, so you get it clear in my mind. Why 6? Why not 7? Why not 8? Why not? Why 6?
I think
Where did 6 come from?
Well, I think initially we had more than that, and that was, like I said, we didn't reinvent the wheel on this. We utilized other examples in other communities. I think that was 10 was a standard number. The Planning Commission as a whole, I think, was uncomfortable with that number and would preferred that it would be reduced to 6, and that's the number they came up with. They thought that that number would be a little more manageable. There were some that were concerned about the impacts of a larger number of chicken.
Did you look at the Teller County code that references domestic fowl? I looked at it, and it appeared it was kind of based on a bird needs X number of square feet in order to be healthy.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that was part of the decision-making process.
That was one we looked at initially, but and then we gave the Planning Commission all the information that we had, a variety of sources, and they just didn't seem to pick up on that one.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Make that change. Hearing none, we'll take a vote on making that change.
Okay, Harrison?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Turley?
Yes.
Rivetto?
Yes.
Carlson?
Yes.
Okay, so the modification change has been approved by council. We're now back to the initial motion approving the ordinance that now includes that change. Yes.
How much is the ZDP again?
ZDP is 34. Plus, there's a 1% building use tax that is applied for materials. So typically for a shed, it adds on another $5 or $10. And I just wanted to just clarify about the design review. I mean, it's not our intention that we get Taj Mahals for these things. All that we're really, I think, and the Planning Commission was looking for is that they be complementary in color to the main structure and material. They don't have to be a certain roof pitch or combination of materials. That's not what we're talking about here.
Do we have the ability to amend this to cap the ZDP cost as it relates to this, as well as opt out of the use tax?
Absolutely.
I'd like to make a motion that we cap the ZDP as it relates to the ordinance to $10.
Flat fee?
The ZDP fee to $10.
Or make it just flat with
flat $10 and no collection of the
use tax. Building material.
So.
Just one comment. I know we've had discussions on fees that are fixed and never adjusting over the years, and eventually that means their value goes decreasingly down. If you're going to make a modification to that, I would ask that the fee be allowed to be adjusted as we adjust all other fees.
The motion maker would accept that suggestion.
So we'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Yes, ma'am.
And it may be that we would come back to council with a minor amendment to your tax code provision, just to conform it to that statement.
Okay.
So if you see that, that's why we're bringing it back to you.
And this is a motion and a second for an amendment to limit that fee. Yes.
Discussion. Yeah, so next year it'll be $10.20. Next year it'll be $10.40. So maybe at a certain level, very minor fee, maybe after 10 years we can adjust it or something like that, rather than incrementalize these to add on all these pennies.
And absolutely whatever you want to do. I mean, it's not worth a lot of this discussion as it relates to this, except it will end up costing you time. We will have to bring back to you, to some council in 10 years and say, do we want to raise this fee? If it's automatically done, then you never have to think about it again.
Unless you eliminate the fee altogether.
Well, let's don't digress too much. We have
not digression.
We have a motion and a second, so we have to deal with that motion and second, before we can go on about.
Part of the discussion is
Yes.
talking about the fee.
It is.
And Eric said, let's go to $10.
Okay.
Versus $34.
He actually made a motion to do
Right.
that.
Correct.
So we will work through that amendment, and then.
And
if
my
we will-
discussion is.
Okay.
My discussion is, why should we have a fee at all?
Okay.
As part of that amendment.
Okay.
I can answer that question if you want me to.
Okay.
We'd have fees for permits. It's one of the things that allows the city to have the revenue to provide the operation. And that's a very good point. If we have fees for, and it's for review, and it's typically based on some amount of staff time. And if we allow a reduced rate or no rate for one particular activity, then someone else is subsidizing that component of the revenue stream or the expenses that it takes. It's not much time. I'm not trying to blow smoke here, but it is a reality. If you start eliminating the fees, where do you stop? Because pretty soon we have to pay for the time that it takes to cause these reviews to take place.
I have a motion for an amendment and a second. Any further discussion? Yes, Terry.
One question, Scott, the use fee,
What's the logic behind the use fee?
My understanding is that it's a recovery of sales tax that this community doesn't usually get because materials are bought outside of this community in cheaper places like Colorado Springs because it's cheaper. However, if they do buy them up here, they can keep their receipts and get a refund on the use tax. So
that's what I want.
Any further?
Kelly had another comment to add.
Okay.
Along those lines of equity of treatment of people, if we've compared the CDP process to setbacks and things that we do for a shed. I would suggest that amending and saying that we're not going to collect a nominal amount of use tax is going to create a monster for, not a monster, but it goes along those same lines. And amending our tax code is quite a feat, and I would suggest that that would maybe not be worth the time and effort for the few cents or few dollars that use tax would be on the building of a chicken coop or the fowl containment. So I would just suggest that maybe rethinking that idea might be worth your time. Thank you.
So based on that, it's easier to calculate what the fee should be and collect it than to just say, in this instance, we're not going to collect a fee.
If it's the council's desire to eliminate the use tax, that's what we will
Well,
do.
no, I'm asking the question because if it's a problem, I mean, we can always, but I just wanted to understand why it's a problem. I mean, when you're building a house, I understand. I mean, we're talking thousands, lots of money. When we're building a shed, I mean, there's just certain things. I mean, I think about, in my home, when I make improvements, I buy materials, and I don't come in and necessarily ask if I can put up that little knee wall and, pay my use tax because I bought the materials somewhere else.
Right.
To me, it's a little bit, sheds and things like this are, it's ticky-tacky.
Well, but we want to be consistent as well. So if we're going to think about doing it away for chicken coops, I want to think about doing it away for sheds. I mean, and maybe that's what we should do. But I think if there's a use tax adjustment, it's going to take a little bit of time, and we can work through that. But
can we just cap the use tax and say it's a standard across the board? If you do not buy the materials inside the city of Woodland Park and you cannot provide a receipt, it's across the board $5. Or and then just it is what it is. And because the thing is, you got a value to come up with the use tax. Somebody has to sit there and say, okay, this coop is this many square feet, $10 a square foot to build, and somebody's sitting there figuring that out. Why can't we just say one coop is the same as every coop, and you know what? We'll collect our $3 a use tax, so it'll be $10 plus $3 a use tax, and if you build the Taj Mahal, hey, you made out a little better. If you can we do it that way? Does that solve the problem?
Well, just keep in mind, it's just the use tax is 1%.
1% of what?
It's 50% of the valuation of the project times 1%, so it's 0.005% of the project cost.
But can we just say that every coop is worth X amount of dollars and we'll collect that amount of money rather than redo all the code? I'm okay with that thought process because otherwise we're going to have Scott or Sally sitting there going, wait a minute, this coop's a little bigger, and therefore the valuation. Who's going to evaluate the value of the coop?
historically, whoever pulls the permit gives us the value, and we do kind of a sanity check on it. And if it makes sense, that's what we charge from. As I've said before, the more you try to make things fair, the more difficult it becomes. If there's a flat fee and you choose to build the Taj Mahal, you've made out. If someone chooses to build bare bones, they may pay more. And so we get challenged on that too.
Yeah, I don't want to recreate the code for a small little and spend all this money, to try to avoid I guess that's why I'm asking the question. If we could just say, you know what, every coop is the same coop, it's $300, and we figure out what that is, and we're going to charge you that unless you can bring us a receipt that shows that you bought the materials in town, then we'll waive it. And to me, that just makes it very simple to administer on our end.
And I would agree with that, because I know that there are some folks in Colorado Springs that build manufactured chicken coops that are, they're already built. They're mobile, and you bring them to your home and use them. So it would be hard to ascertain what the project cost. It's just a flat cost of the manufactured chicken coop. So I think a flat use fee would make more sense.
What we could do, and what we do with re-roofs and decks and other small projects, is we have these big increments, 0 to 1,000. Value is $5, 1,000 to 2,000. So it makes it very broad and very easy to administer.
And that would fit within our current process?
We already do it on certain other things. So.
Then I would amend my motion, if I can.
It's not the exact procedure, but let's do it.
I would amend the motion that I made. That
Make
would
the
say
motion
that
as to what you want.
The ZDP set at $10, adjusted for inflation, and that we will utilize the current process that we have on small projects for administering the
user fee,
the use tax.
That amends my second.
Okay.
Correct.
We have a motion and a second on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
And hopefully, I think you'll have to probably go back and listen to the tape to get that exactly.
Mayor.
And any further discussion on the amendment? Then we will vote on that change.
Okay, Harvey,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Turley,
Yes.
Rivetto,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Now we're back to the original motion with those two changes that we made. Any further discussion on the ordinance now with those two changes? Hearing none, we will take a vote.
Okay, Smith,
Yes.
Turley,
Yes.
Rivetto,
Yes.
Carlson,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Harvey.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, council. Thank you, citizens and everyone for working through this. And I will just say, I mean, it's a lot of the discussion that we had wasn't really about chickens. It was really about process and what we include in code and how we include it, which is an issue for many of us in the community and for members of this council. So, I mean, that's what I would like for you to take away from that. It wasn't about really the chickens themselves and the ordinance. It was the process that we used to do all that. So, we're there? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say that I understand where Gary's coming from, and it's a fine line between trying to regulate and not regulate and where we draw the line. I appreciate the dialogue with Aaron tonight, and I do think I'm glad we passed it. I guess 30% of the community can benefit from it based upon the covenants that are in place. And one comment that I would make is I would like to have some direction as we're relates, or I'd like to, at least a report on how we're going to deal with the folks that already have chickens, because I know that the parks do, and I think there should be a reasonable way of handling that. So
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, council.
Well, it just bothers me that we have to regulate something to make it easier.
Yeah, that's true.
I think,
Okay.
I really do not like government. I absolutely don't. I do have a question, though. I mean, does this, since we have passed this ordinance now, and it includes the fowl, I guess, that was listed, so if somebody wants pigeons, they're only allowed 6 pigeons. Somebody wants geese, they're only allowed 6 geese. So.
That's what we voted on.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, but
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
they understood that.
How long is the next item going to take? Should we take a little break or? Oh, 2 seconds?
Yeah,
Okay.
hopefully not too long. Item number 10 is new business. This is approving emergency ordinance number 1179, and for that, I'll turn to our city attorney, Aaron Smith.
Mayor and council, we presented for you an emergency ordinance which you directed us to prepare and present at this meeting. This ordinance puts on hold the issuance of any business licenses to any of the marijuana retail and other facilities that are going to be allowed by Amendment 64. Those include marijuana cultivating facilities, marijuana manufacturing facilities, marijuana testing facilities, and marijuana retail stores. The moratorium extends through July 1st of 2013, at which time the state is supposed to have completed its licensing regulatory process. The council can then at that time determine if it wants to extend the moratorium or not. This moratorium is presented to you as an emergency ordinance, which, as you may recall, Councilman Smith, Mayor Pro Tem Smith, pointed out at your last meeting, does require that all council members present vote in favor of it in order for it to pass. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from council on this?
And public hearing is not required on this. You can take public comment if you'd like, but it is not required.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the moratorium.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of ordinance number 1179. Any comment from council? And we will vote.
Turley.
Yes.
Bravetto.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Harvey.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. We'll now open the floor for any public comment for items not on the agenda. Anyone have anything for tonight? Seeing none, we'll move into reports. I have a couple of quick things. Very pleased with the holiday home tour that was conducted this past weekend, and the auction is still going on their website, wphht.org. So there's quite a few nice items out there. Just a great event for our community. Would also like to thank the Tracy Bennett and all the members of the parade committee. It was absolutely a great Christmas parade that we had on Saturday night, and then also Debbie Pinella and the folks that worked on the staff that worked at the Cultural Center and preparing for the events there, and the music and singing and the lighting of the tree, and the mayor pressed the button and it actually worked. So it was just a wonderful evening. We have several upcoming events I'll go through. Tomorrow evening, December the 6th, is the 24th Annual Prospect Home Care and Hospice Lights of Love. That's at the UPass Cultural Center from 6 to 8. Friday, December the 7th, we have Winter Day in Memorial Park, and that's organized by Parks and Rec with the help from others, and that's from 3:30 to 5:30, and I don't think the cold weather's here for that.
Bring your wagon instead of your sleigh.
Bring your wagon instead of your sleigh. Saturday, December the 8th is the Winter Farmers Market at the Use Pass Cultural Center, and that's from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., a great event to be able to take advantage of some market items in the winter. On Sunday, December the 9th, we have, again at the Ute Pass Cultural Center, the Woodland Park Wind Symphony and Swing Factory Sounds of Christmas concert That's from 7 to 8:30 p.m., and that is free. And then on Thursday, December the 20th, we have the Woodland Park Community Singers performing holiday favorites, and that's at the Woodland Park Library from 6:30 to 7 p.m. And that's all I have as mayor.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone involved in the Christmas parade. It was wonderful, and I didn't get to enjoy it like I do normally because I actually drove this year, and that was a little more challenging than I thought. I kept thinking I was going to run over somebody, but seemed like it was a great turnout, and seems like every year that just gets bigger and bigger, and that's wonderful. I heard the mayor was on a motorcycle wearing a Santa suit. Is that true?
Well, I was a Santa helper, so I had a little something on.
I'd just like to say I believe this is our last meeting for the year, so I'd like to say Merry Christmas to everyone and have a wonderful holiday season.
And we'll talk about that in a few minutes about the next meeting. Gary, anything?
A little pitch, historical preservation. We have usually once a month, a group of people get together to decide what we need to do to preserve our history here in Woodland Park. And one of the things we discussed is, and this is with the DDA and a bunch of other places too, is to make Woodland Park more of a mural-friendly place, illustrate the history of Woodland Park, and make this a destination area by attracting people here, but having something colorful to attract them here. So we're putting a group of people together to walk around the city in January sometime. We haven't figured the exact date yet. To look around and take a look at maybe some potential buildings that could use some colorful uplift by having some murals that depict some of our early history. And I'd like to invite anybody out there who's interested in that to join us. And Sally Riley, just call Sally. And if you want to be part of that process, it'd be great. It's just an initial project to identify buildings. And then after that, what we do is get permission, obviously, from the building owners, et cetera. And then after that, try to figure out what kind of murals will be on there and how to pay for it. So this is not an overnight process, but it's something I think we're starting to initiate. I know Brian's in on this too, and to make downtown a much more friendly place to be and make it more of a destination place to be and then attract people here by doing that. So I invite everybody.
Very good.
Help us out with that.
Okay. Bob, anything?
No, just a question on the auction. When does that close? Do you know?
The 9th.
The 9th.
December 9th, right?
Okay.
Yeah. 10 p.m. Friday, December 9th. It will be closed.
I guess I got lost on that.
The virtual marketplace for the holiday home tour
I mean, it's the last
on the website.
It's the thing, If you want to be on at 10 p.m.
Okay. Terry, anything?
Sunday the 9th at 10 p.m.
Terry, anything?
Thank you, Cindy.
I think, David, you'll have a question coming up?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Carol? And I'll turn to our city attorney.
I have nothing other than to wish everyone a happy Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Okay. David?
What you've been alluding to is canceling the December 20th meeting, and Mayor, I think we've concluded our work for this year, and so my recommendation is that you, someone make a motion.
So moved.
Second. So we have a motion and a second to cancel the December the 20th meeting. And any discussion? Suzanne?
I put away my roll call book. Hold on.
Just make it up.
Okay.
Aye.
Turley.
Yes.
Rivetto.
Yes.
Carlson.
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
Harvey. Yes. Smith.
Sure.
And lastly, I'd like to advise the council that this is Scott's last council meeting. Scott has accepted a position in Redmond, Oregon, and he and his family will be moving at the end of the year to Bend, Oregon. Scott's been with us just shy of 3 years. He's done incredible work for the planning department, for the planning commission, and for the city. Certainly much more than a foul ordinance. He brought great experience to us, and in the time period that he's been here, he's helped us all grow, and he's earned his certification as a certified planner. So we wish Scott and his family well. And that's all we have this evening, Mayor.
And I will just quickly second the comments about Scott.
I've really enjoyed working with you over the past few years, and really do want to wish you the very best, and that's a very nice area to be going to also. And I'd like to, we have such a great community, and the holiday season is a wonderful time, and I think, you know, it's just great seeing the number of things that are going on in Woodland Park. I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and be safe and enjoy your friends, your family, and live life to the fullest. Meeting adjourned.